or a Christmas present.
So the question was, and we already got a couple answers, but I'm going to restate it for the recording. What would happen if rates came down? What if the Fed and their effect of reducing a certain amount of basis points brought down rates 1/8%? What would it do? And there's a reason why I'm getting particular with this. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I'm here to tell you, I think it's almost a bad thing, and bear with me. Here's why. I agree. If it's a big chunk, then people are going to run out, and we have a just an abundance of buyers. But if it's a modest decrease, isn't it possible that the psychology of people is like, well, maybe if I wait one more Fed announcement, maybe it comes down another eighth and another eighth. And so we almost have the same effect as when rates were creeping up, right? So my point is stability for our industry is a good thing. The faster that the public says, well, this just kind of is the industry norm, it's not changing up and down too much, a lot of people finally just get off the fence. The problem is we have been adjusting, and so people have been waiting. So I would be thrilled to have 3 Fed meetings where they just leave rates alone, because I think it would drastically improve. And then if they wanted to, make a big jump in the springtime, fantastic. But I think if they lowered it an eighth at a time, I think the public is going to sit there and go, maybe I should wait some more, which is not good for us. So just that's me pontificating on statistical analysis from a complete unprofessional with just a lot of experience. Wow, I didn't even get a laugh, not a few smiles, not even. All right. I guess that means time to move on. All right. I actually have a sheet over here. I have a lot to cover today, you guys. And for those of you that have been in sales meetings, some of this is going to be a little bit of a rehash, but I wanted to um, add some to what I've already covered in the sales meeting in central and the northern areas. And it has to do with the Sitzer Burnett case, right? Um, so I'm going to, Jill, please don't hate me if you've heard this before. Repetition is the mother of learning, right? Repetition is the mother of learning. So the Sitzer Burnett case, Dan, so I don't have to talk the whole time. Can you just give a brief rehash of, the high level view of what is the Sitzer Burnett case really about?
The case was about collusion within the real estate market, whether or not agents are colluding on and price fixing on commissions. And so the jury found that in Missouri they were, and that and they awarded the plaintiffs a lot of money.
Yeah.
um, but from my understanding, yeah, like it really like came down to the way that they communicated commissions with their buyers, and the NAR and a handful of brokerages lost the case. So that's in a nutshell.
Okay. Thank you. Pretty good. I'm going to just add a few things to round that out. What the notes I had under what is it about is number one, and it may be worthwhile jotting this down or coming back to this video so that when somebody asks you about it, if they ask you about it, you can quickly articulate. One, the primary reason or complaint was that sellers were unfairly having to pay through their brokerage fee a BAC, which represented a service offered to the buyers, right? Based on NAR's policies, MLS policies, and brokerage policies, that they were unduly being burdened with costs that should be borne on the buyer side. So that's the first one. Sellers were being charged unfairly for buyer agency representation. Second point, since commissions for the buyers were being part of the sale, sales prices were artificially inflated. So that's the second component, right? And by the way, here's a side note. Do you understand how ludicrous this is? That's what my notes say, right? Those of us that were around in 2008 in the downturn. Then in 2010, we had the Dodd-Frank bill, a federal bill, right, that became part of our industry. And part of that Dodd-Frank bill was, hey, appraisers are the problem. They were artificially, notice I'm using the same words here, we're artificially inflating prices of the homes to game the market at the expense of the public. Therefore, we're going to create this wonderful thing called an AMC, an appraisal management company, so that appraisers would be shielded from sellers, buyers, and agents. Therefore, we would have real numbers. Catch what I just said there? So if that's in place, how exactly are we raising prices to cover buyers, agents, commissions? It's kind of preposterous, but that's a more detailed discussion later on. All right. The third thing that I put on my list here was the reason all of these things happen was because NAR requires MLSs currently, and it's true of UtahRealEstate.com, and I imagine it'll be changing very shortly. The reason why MLSs do what NAR says is because if the MLS wants to have insurance coverage provided by NAR, then they will follow NAR rules. Therefore, most MLSs follow NAR rules. And NAR says that you had to offer a co-broke commission on your MLS, a BAC. And this was front and center in the case, right? And this is the collusion between NAR and the MLSs and the brokers. And so those are the three things that the case was really about. And of course, as Dan pointed out, didn't go our way, at least at the initial court level, and plans to be appealed. The problem with class action lawsuits is you get treble damages. So when they say the award was 1.8 billion, it's really 5.4 billion with a B. That's a big number. Okay. The second note I had on here was that for a little more than a week, this was a solid PR issue. Most of the news channels, most of the national websites carried some story about this case. And in the past week and a half, I've asked this at sales meeting, what have you seen in the news about it?
Nothing. Quieted down. Yeah.
I've looked and I haven't seen anything. If I go to a publication like Real Estate News or something like that, of course I'm going to see information about that, because that's where us as trade professionals go to gather some of our information. But whether it's CNN or NBC or CBS, ABC, any of the channels, you don't see anything about it. Yes, Joyce.
Well, and you mentioned, the trade publications. There are now lawsuits springing up everywhere. And I think what I'm seeing as the undertone is real estate agents make way too much money. And so the pressure is on us to really start talking to our people about what we do. I learned a long time ago that where I thought I was just efficiently going through the steps of a sale or a transaction, I learned I needed to alert my people each time I did something. Hey, today I talked to the home inspector. Today I did this, which was hard to kind of take that I did this approach. But I realized I was instilling value by keeping people aware of the many, many steps and what I was doing each day, each week on their behalf.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're in a hot pot right now.
We are our own worst enemy many times. And as we discussed this today, some of the points you brought up are so spot on, Joyce. And front and center of that is we're just not really good at articulating our value. If somebody comes and does an interrogation of us, we can recite the things that we do, but in a marketing way, kind of articulating the things that we do as we do them and making it conversational and build relationships. I think that's where we're really deficient as an industry, right? We get, all of you have had this experience, right? If you get so many transactions on your plate, all of a sudden that communication, that proactivity tends to be the first victim, right? It's like, I just ran out of time, when it's probably one of the most important things you can do. Okay. All right. So I want to jump to Saturday morning. I got this. Did somebody have a comment? Okay, good.
Saturday morning. That was before the Ute and USC beating.
Listen, Bill, I have the power to just mute you permanently.
Did you not hear I said both?
Yeah, true. Although Utah gave it a solid effort. So, okay, so let me pull up this text message. This is what I got. Let's see. 9:36 in the morning. Sorry, this was it was Friday. I stand corrected. So this was from Kyler to Ron Snow and myself. He says, "Hey guys, we'll be releasing a series of videos we recorded in the next few days. Once they're all refined, all videos will be available on UAR members only website in the legal library and tagged as relevant to the changing legal landscape." That's good. Hey, your dues dollars producing a product. Deanna, who works with Chris, will be sending an email to the UAR membership with a link to all the library resources. I just asked Craig, who's one of the attorneys at UAR, to cut 2 new videos soon. The most important new one is to instruct our buyers, agents, and brokers to stop, and he put in capital letters, stop, putting 0 in the compensation section of the buyer's agency agreement, and then only showing them listings that offer a BAC. They're essentially, these are his words, they're essentially hanging themselves by producing a written record evidence proving they told the buyer their service was free, all while intending on getting paid through the BAC, playing right into the hands of the Sitzer case. Very dangerous. It's pure laziness, lack of confidence, or lack of understanding on the part of as agents to avoid describing their value. In light of, good job, Joyce, see that? To avoid establishing their value. In light of Sitzer, it can't happen anymore. I know your peeps are, I know you guys are peeps. I know your peeps are doing it right. This is just a heads up that I'm asking all brokers who are speaking out on the topic with their brokerage or in their leadership roles to please emphasize this point. While our Utah law and forms protect members who use them right, this is an instance where the forms will kill them if they're used wrong. And so this is the point I want to make. The reason why Chris is proactively reaching out one-on-one with brokers is because this is a big deal. What happened the very day the verdict in Missouri came out? A national lawsuit was launched by the same attorney, right? A national class action. That means everybody, including everybody on this call, is a potential target.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah, Parker.
Sorry, that's the same lawsuit where he's also representing the buyers who are now claiming, correct?
He was actually representing the sellers. The fact
No,
that
in the initial lawsuit, but isn't this new lawsuit, this new class action lawsuit brought by buyers?
So okay, a lot of questions without getting too far off in the weeds.
Right.
The initial case in Missouri was predominantly about sellers,
Right.
and a secondary layer was that buyers were being harmed because prices were going up. He's using that same basic premise and taking it nationally.
Right.
Right. So yes, it is covering buyers, but first and foremost, it's sellers being charged to pay for buyers' representation, which is not their responsibility. So I guess my point is, shot fired across the bow. We're all good practitioners. We do have good forms. We are well schooled on this. I was going to bring up a video where I sent this out well over a year ago that said, hey, you can't tell people your services are free. And oh, by the way, the company, my office managers on the call, they know this. We will not accept 0 in either an EBB or an ERS in the brokerage fee, nor will we accept it being blank. Right? I had to argue with one of our agents for almost an hour who represented a team saying, I think that's bullcrap that we put that in there, that we make them do this. I'm like, oh my gosh. Basically, if you leave it blank or put 0, your listing or your buyer broker is an advertisement, and you're advertising a lie that you work for free. You don't work for free. Just because somebody else pays it doesn't mean you're not working for profit. So I'm just sharing this with you so you guys know, not to be like panic stricken, because we are doing most of what we do is right. And there's going to be a few things that I'm going to talk about today that hopefully we can collectively get better at, so that as this rolls forward, we're confident and we're not running scared, and we do it right and we stay out of harm's way. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the specific things we need to be doing now, and specifically what we shouldn't be doing regarding this issue. So the first one I have, and please participate if you have a comment on these. All right. First and foremost, have your agency representation, whether buyer or seller, in place before you start representing somebody. Now, on the listing side, that's mostly not a problem. Where do I see it a lot? On the buyer side. Well, I'll get that pesky agency relationship a little further down the road if we go under contract. I want you to now just think Burnett Sitzer for a minute, right? If they can pull, and they can, if they pull documentation that says, oh, Matt, you were representing Dan, and even though your document was really good in disclosing what the responsibility was and who was paying and all those protections, but you only did it like as the transaction was going to closing. Did I really accomplish anything by having him sign that agency agreement 3 weeks, 4 weeks after agency actually started? No. As an attorney on the other side, I will chew that up, right? Really, right? It's the example I used, I think it was with you, Dan, the other day, or somebody, was we have a buyer due diligence document, right? And the attorneys in the state of Utah, especially the UAR attorneys, have referred to this quite often as the get out of jail free document, right? Because it says, I don't work for the city zoning. I don't work for the EPA. I'm not a tax attorney. I'm not a legal, all the things that we're not. And then what do agents do sometimes? After getting that document signed, what do? You know it, Parker.
They talk specifically to those matters.
That's right. So that's like me saying, hey, Parker, I'm not a tax attorney, but here's what I know as a professional. You will save so much money on taxes. I'm like, oh my gosh, you just, and these same attorneys will tell you when you do that, you lose the protection, right? And so it's kind of that way in reverse with our agency agreement. You can't start working as somebody's agent and negotiate something and then change the game. Let me use a different example. If everybody knows, right, that the Division of Real Estate says you cannot buy your own listings. Does everybody know that's a rule? And why? Why can't you, inherently, why can you not buy your own listings?
Inherent conflict of interest.
Yeah. You're the buyer who's trying to get the best deal, and you've through your ERS, you've said you're going to do what's in the best interest of the seller, and they're fundamentally opposed to each other. And so I've had this a few times recently where an agent who has a listing, and it usually follows this sequence, especially in this market, all of a sudden it comes down, or the seller offers another incentive, typically talked about in confidence, right, with their listing agent, and all of a sudden the listing agent goes, that could be a good deal for me and or my friend or uncle or investment group or whatever, or the LLC that I'm a part owner in. I'm going to turn around and make an offer on that. Can you do that? Yeah, you can, if you don't want your license very long. What do you do in that situation, by the way?
You get a straw buyer, you create an LLC.
Dan, this is being recorded. Stop.
You cancel the listing. Cancel the listing or give it to a coworker.
There you go. Cancel the listing, give it to a coworker. Can you accept a referral off of that? Yes, you can, because you're not their agent anymore, right? They have their own agent at that point who has all those fiduciaries to a seller, and then you can go forward as a buyer. But what we see sometimes is the negotiation of the REPSI takes place, and then the listing agent says, oh, I can't be doing this, so now I'm going to remove myself. Yeah, it doesn't work that way, because you negotiated the REPSI while you had the advantage and put your seller at a disadvantage by those fiduciaries. So sorry, I derailed a little bit, but that's come up a couple times recently. I want to make sure we're all on the same page. All right. So 1, have your agency representation in place. By the way, I have a side note here. By the way, it's a DRE rule too, right? In fact, in the prohibited actions, affirmative action section of our licensure, it says you're to get agency when agency starts. And then when you write a REPSI, it's to be confirmed again. That's rule number 2 and rule number 9. These are easy to find, but I think we as an industry sometimes ignore those because, it's just challenging to get that up front. All right. Second one, use the UAR forms and fill them out completely and correctly. And then I put the note, and don't be cute and put your own junk into them. So what's the definition of cute and put your own junk into them, right? The section in brokerage fee has one blank and separated by an and then another blank. One's a dollar field and one's a percentage field. Those two together, whether they're both filled out or one's filled out, but even if they're both filled out together, is known as a brokerage fee. They're combined. What I see agents do to kind of skirt this in the past is TBD. Don't do that. Or they try and put in a very small font per BAC. Don't do that. Contracts are about clarity. Contracts can be adjusted because commissions are negotiable, and they can be negotiated as we go through a process or as the situation dictates. But you start from a point of clarity so that somebody cannot make the claim, I didn't know what that meant. Dan.
So let's say you have a buyer broker with a client, and it's exclusive to a single property, and that single property is offering less than 3% BAC.
It just happens to be an arbitrary number because there's no industry standard.
Just for example.
For example only.
For example, well, specifically, let's say the BAC offered on the MLS is 2.5%. And so you're like, hey, that totally works for me.
Yeah.
So would you put 2.5% in that window? Could you say, let's see, could you not put a number there and say, see addendum 1, and then in addendum 1 write out, the commissions, not to exceed whatever is offered on the MLS, that kind of verbiage. Like what Mr. Principal Broker, what would you prefer to see in a scenario like that where what the BAC is, where the client may be, sensitive to that subject, and you just really what you're saying is, hey, you're not going to owe me anything beyond what the BAC is and what the dollar sign, so 295 or whatever the number is we put in there. Yeah. But what would you like to see there?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I'm not saying that facetiously. It really is a great question because these are kind of the real world things.
Normally, when you say that's a great question, do you mean it facetiously then?
With you, yes. I have to keep you happy, Dan.
It already says that.
Say that again, Haley.
It already says that in the paragraph.
It does. Well, so what it says, and I'm going to paraphrase, it says that what is offered by way of BAC will cover the company's charge unless it drops below the amount that was stated.
So it already says it.
So our company, there is nothing wrong with a company by itself saying our company charges X for our representation. Now, I asked this in the sales meetings. Does our company have a fixed percentage that we require you to put on a listing or a buyer broker? No, we don't. So that's good for us. That's highly defensible, right? I would dare them to point us to a document in our company that says you will charge this. And even if we did, we'd be okay. But it helps us. But now, Dan, to your question, your business practices, let's say, because I know you're a really good agent. You and Janelle do a great job for your clients. You offer a lot of additional services. You are more, I'm just going to call it full service. And so you may determine in your best interest for your business practices that you're going to charge 2 3/4 or 3 or 3 1/4. When I was at C21, I had some agents that were charging 7% on their brokerage fee. I saw them as high as 10%. Is there anything wrong with that? No. I mean, my gosh, if you can get clients and you can provide, as Joyce said, if you can establish value in their eyes to where they're willing to pay that amount and it's legitimate value, have at it, because there's no restriction on that. But when you just say things like, well, I just charge what everybody else charges. I just charge what the industry standard is. I just charge what is normal. I'm going to charge you the normal 3%. Oh, please don't say that, because it's like the buyer due diligence document. You declared that there isn't a set commission, and then you're talking like there is a set commission, an industry standard. And unfortunately, we get to deal with it with our ancillary companies, title and otherwise, right? They say, oh, so are you gonna pay the industry standard BAC? It's like, well, what the hell is that? That doesn't exist. So just be aware of that, guys. Our words matter, especially words that are documented in text or documents themselves in emails. Please steer clear of anything that would suggest a norm, a standard. It should always be, this is what I charge, or this is what our company charges. And those are the guardrails. Don't go beyond those guardrails, me or the company. Okay, fair? Joyce.
So I'm going to put myself out on a limb here and ask a question that I really should know the answer to, and probably do, but I want to hear from you. I've had an offer on a listing. It's lapsed to on the buyer's part, various circumstances. However, they're reapproaching. The BAC on this particular listing that our company is offering is 2.5%. On a standard REPC addendum, the agent has asked for 3%. Yeah, I would like you to clarify.
If I had hair on the side of my head, I'd be pulling it out.
Yeah. How would you recommend that be written? Escrow agreement.
Dear agent on the other side, have you lost your freaking mind?
No, that's what my brain thinks, but my words always try to be diplomatic.
Okay, so one, hold that thought, Joyce, because it's going to dovetail on Dan's. I didn't come all the way to answering Dan's question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's all right, because they're related, right? So Dan, in your situation, if you have an ERS that says 2.5, right? Or sorry, an EBB that has 2.5, and the BAC says 2%, right? What's the company going to say? Company is going to say, well, Dan, how do you want to proceed? We always want to back up our agents. If you want to have the conversation with your buyers and tell them they signed a contract that says they need to bring in 0.5%, is that legit?
Yep.
Yeah, 100% is. It's a contract. I know we lose sight of that all the time. It's a contract that they signed. It's a bilateral contract, right? Both parties agreed to it. Okay. We also give our agents the latitude, because sometimes things happen on the fly as we go. You're representing a buyer and they're like, oh, well, you know what? In order to fund this, I mean, I can fund it, but I'm going to be more comfortable if I sell some land I have up somewhere, or sell a condo I have. Hey, would you be willing to do that, Dan? Is there any way we could make this a little more equitable for us? Am I going to push for them for that extra 0.5 point? No. The company has the prerogative, but it's not a mandate. I'm just telling you, you can pursue it. It's going to typically be the agent's call. But listen, I'll paint the extreme. Dan, you know I do this, right? If there was a listing out there that said $100 BAC and you had a 2.5% BAC EBB, and you came to me and said, hey, can we just take the $100? I can be like, no. Right? We are a for-profit business. I know that gets lost sight of sometimes. It is a for-profit business, and there is calculus that goes into it. Just know this, I'll leave it at this, Dan, and then get to your question, then to Joyce's. But anytime we close a deal, and it happens so rarely, there is always the potential of it hitting the fan either during or after, and a lawsuit ensues. I've got 3 that I'm working with right now, right? And that just goes into our business calculation of what we allow you guys to charge so that the numbers work and we stay in business. Is that a fair statement? We're not going to do a deal for $100 and then get into a $50,000 or $100,000 lawsuit potentially. Dan, go ahead, and then Joyce.
So I think that totally works for 99% of the EBBAs that we're going to be signing, right?
Yep.
And that's how I've operated forever. In rare occasion where we know we're going to go into a single option with a client. So this buyer wants to buy that home, and they're only willing to sign a buyer broker for you to represent them on purchasing that home. Okay. And they're price sensitive. Like to my example before, see addendum 1. I'm not, like, can you write in addendum 1 that buyer agent commission not to exceed, BAC, that kind of wording?
Yes. The short answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So his point is, if you're in that situation and you work with your broker and it's like, listen, this is I'm just using a facetious example. It's at the 1 million price point, and it looks like the properties we've been looking at are at a 2% BAC. I had him sign for a 2.5. He's really nervous about that, doesn't want to put in an offer until he has a guarantee. Can we write in an addendum? Yes, we can. We can say, if you make an offer on property X and they're offering something less than the BAC, we will accept what the BAC is on the MLS. Can we do that? Yes, we absolutely can. But what you can't do, just to paint the other side of the picture here, is you can't say, I'm not going to show my clients anything that's below what we have signed in a document. That's fundamentally opposed to what's in their best interest, which means you're breaching your fiduciary, and it adds to the lawsuits like Sitzer and Burnett. All right, Joyce, to your question, sorry, restate it, and I'll try and address it.
Well, so buyer's agent on a standard Rep C to the addendum to the Rep C has requested a 0.5% higher commission.
Right. Yeah, first of all.
Than offered. So I'm thinking he needs to put that on the real estate brokerage commissions / escrow agreement. I need to go back and revise the EBB, the listing agreement, not the EBB, but the listing agreement for that 0.5 point, so that the sellers agree to pay for it. And then we attach that brokerage commission as part of the Rep C. But commissions are not to be negotiated in an offer between buyer and seller. So I just kind of need clarification and have you tell me the right steps.
Okay, notice my emoji I just put on my picture. Good job, Joyce.
All right.
All right, listen, such important stuff, and all of these are tangent to what we're talking about today. Agents still do it. In a REPSI, which is a contract between a buyer and seller, they're turning around, and I've heard the justification, well, it's a responsibility of my buyer, so that's why I'm putting it in the REPSI. No, we're not signers to the REPSI, right? So when an agent puts in there specifically BAC to be increased to in a REPSI, that's a no-fly zone, red flag, stop it in its track, and let's coach the other agent through in a loving way how to do it right. And there's a couple of ways to do it right. The way you explained it is, hey, if that's a showstopper for you, let me have a conversation with my sellers. See if they're willing. We're living up to our fiduciaries right then, right? And we have that conversation. Giselle, are you sharing your picture?
It's a nice picture.
Oh, shoot. No, I don't know how to fix that.
Just push stop share. I'll share mine back.
Your hair looks great in that picture.
Oh, I wish it still looked like that. Oh, stop share. Yeah. What the hell am I doing? So sorry, everyone.
That's okay. You provided some comedic relief.
Madam President just wanted to let everybody know.
She's in her last month and a half.
Oh gosh, stop
it. Thank you for your service, Giselle.
I'll turn off your dating profile page.
Hey, don't say that out loud.
Back on task. No, never negotiate your commissions or the other side's commissions in the REPSI, right? So to your point, yes, talk with the sellers. Are they willing to do it? If they say, sure, we want to get the deal done. If that's a deal breaker for him, his clients, which we don't have any knowledge of, great, we'll do it. And you're right. We would increase, we'd say that addendum to be removed from the REPC. And if and when we have escrow instructions signed showing that he will be paid that amount, then whatever else follows on that is REPC related, we can then put in the REPC, right? Which quite often sometimes is seller will agree to pay, $3,000 of the buyer's closing costs, right? Well, that's because the way this works a lot of time is because the buyer's agent has agreed to contribute some of what his company makes to their closing costs. And so it's a domino. We agree to pay them more, then they have an addendum to their EBB that says they're going to pay $3,000, or we do to the REPC just in reverse, reduce the BAC by whatever that amount is that they want the seller to contribute to the buyer's closing costs. And then here's the caveat, here's the kicker. There's also the brokerage payment addendum, which avoids the words commissions and BAC. It simply says, I'm going to restate it in my words. It says, we know that the buyer has some financial commitments to their agent, their brokerage that is their agent in this transaction. The seller agrees to pay X dollars or X percent in addition to whatever is out there by way of BAC on behalf of the buyer for their financial commitments to their brokerage. I know it's largely saying the same thing, but it's saying it the right way that is allowable. Parker.
Hey, I know that you've gone over that before in these meetings, but that is an addendum that I use all the time.
Sure. I'm looking for it. What's it called?
If you go to the legacy forms section of the MLS, right, and all you search on is brokerage, it's going to come up, I think, with one document. It's going to be that addendum.
Thank you.
And it's fantastic. It came online about 2.5, 3 years ago because so many people were negotiating BAC in the REPC. So that's the
they taught it that way for a while, Matt. They said that the buyer has the right to ask the seller to pay an obligation on his behalf. Yeah. So they completely taught it differently than that the additional amount could go on an addendum because the buyer was asking the question. It was between the buyer and the seller. So Joyce, don't be too hard on that other agent because that's how they were teaching it.
Right. Yeah. I haven't addressed it with him yet, but I'm expecting a revised offer today. And I wanted to counsel on how he might reconsider approaching that.
Oh man, I love your wording.
Just tell him that's how your broker wants it. So
yeah, and you know what? And Haley, you bring up such a good point. Listen, in the state of Utah with UAR and other things, they've had to revise things from time to time. That's just the nature of our business. And I think when they did talk about that, I think where it started to go sideways is when they started using the term BAC, right? And because that's a contract between two brokers. So now you're negotiating a contract between two brokers and a contract between buyer and seller. And that's where it becomes hugely problematic. So, all right, I got to move on. We've got 13, see my timer, 13 minutes, 48 seconds. All right. Use UAR form. Don't put zero. Correctly portray things as they are. For example, on the BAC, on the MLS, let's see, BAC on the MLS is only what the seller is choosing to provide with an offer by the co-broker. So I wanted to make that point. So we kind of get lazy in our language sometimes, right? And we say, oh, don't worry, I'm working for free. Can't say that. Or the BAC is going to cover what you owe me. It could not. So the fact that there's some scenarios where it could not, you probably should not be using that language. The correct way to say it is, what we charge as a company is X. Our experience is most of the time that is covered, but in the case that it's not, just know that we would have a discussion about what needs to be brought to make our contract between you and our company complete. Is that hard to, is that a tough conversation? It depends on how you approach it. If you're matter of fact, by and large, everything I say, I know has an exception, but for the high probability, the sweet spot, most of the time, people are like, oh, okay, cool, let's go. All right. Let's see. Our EBB.
Hey, Matt, I think it helps to mention that that conversation is better had sooner rather than later.
Oh my gosh.
Not only to build your value up with the client, but you don't want to be surprising them at the tail end of something that they really like at a 2.5%, and then you have to explain why they're paying more out of pocket to cover your cost. So explaining that at the very beginning not only builds value and educates the client, but also avoids a lot of pain in the process later down the line.
So many things, Parker, such a great point. So many things in our life, and I'm not talking just real estate. I mean, it's relationship based, it's children. It's a lot of times it's your success depends on how you manage expectations. So if you set the correct expectations up front, the very definition, Dan, your wife's a therapist, check me if I'm wrong, but I think the close to the clinical definition of frustration is unmet expectations. You know?
Is that why Dan is the way he is?
That's why he's so
psychoanalysis.
We owe his wife a debt of gratitude for getting him to a place of normalcy.
I used to be so much worse.
So true. No, but listen, in all joking aside, this really is. I have Parker, Giselle, you guys have all been with me for years, and I've harped on this over the years. Managing expectations, in my humble estimation, is one of the biggest key factors in an agent's success. Just think about that. What do most agents do? They don't manage the expectations. And the way I know that is because I ask them, well, did you have this conversation with him? No. So when you don't specifically state what the expectation is, you're leaving it up to their imagination. And I can promise you, the vast majority of time, when you leave it to their imagination, it's going to be way worse than what reality is. And by that time, now you've got the definition of frustration, because they have this expectation and here's reality, and there's a big delta between the two, and now they're frustrated. And guess who the conduit is for the frustration? You, or the industry, or realtors in general, or, and so, part of this, frankly, like Chris said, is laziness. It's laziness. We want to, especially now, think about this with electronic signatures. We'll loosely talk to somebody. I'm talking not anybody on this call, but just generally as an industry. Well, hey, listen, I'm going to send you over the buyer broker agreement that needs to get signed before I can go and show you homes. And we send it over, and we all know how the electronic platforms work. It points them right to where they need to sign. It doesn't require that they read it. And as a result, they sign it. And then we go on our merry way. It got agency in place. And we didn't do any of our job explaining what the provisions in the EBB, the protections for them, what we're going to do. And then something hits the fan, and then we turn right to that document and say, well, it says it right in the buyer broker. Well, you never explained it to me. I'm not making this stuff. I can say this so fast because it's what I deal with all the time, right? My agent never explained that to me. What am I supposed to do as a principal broker at that point? Crap.
Matt, on our SkySlope, when we're sending off for an electronic signature, does it document the email? They ask us to send an email message. Does it document that? I can't ever find it, but always in there, I always state, please review this information and contact me if you have any questions or concerns before you sign anything.
Oh man, I owe you lunch, Parker.
Yeah.
So listen, this is why, trust me, all the admins on the call, they're the brunt of this. Why are you making me do this? Why do I have to use SkySlope? Why can't we just blah, blah, blah? Well, this is one of the reasons. SkySlope is a true journaling system. And what I mean by that, you send an email, including the notes that you sent, it's recorded and can't be deleted. When it was opened is recorded. When it was responded to, it was recorded, right? These are all very important things, but I want to make sure I tie on this final point. Just because you sent the document, just because we can show they opened it, just because we know they signed it, doesn't mean that you managed expectations. So I've advocated this for a long time. If you're still not doing this, please do. I know some of you are. If you need help with it, I've already got marked up forms. Before you send it over for signature, pull out your doc set. If it's electronic, fine. If it's a literal folder, that's fine. And make sure the key points are discussed. Hey, just so you know, let me give you an example. What do you say when it comes to protection period? Anyone?
What do I say, or what do I put?
Do you even talk to it?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, what do you? It's short version. What do you say?
Short version, I just say, look, this is a protection period that helps protect me when I've showed you a property, and for one reason or another, our agreement is no longer in contract. Any property that I've showed you for a certain amount of time after that contract, I'm still owed a commission on as procuring costs. Then they ask,
okay,
procuring costs.
I love it. Parker, I'm going to cut you off. Not a bad version, but notice what was said there, so that I'm owed a commission. So it kind of becomes about you again.
Sure.
And here's just on that particular paragraph. I started using this years ago. I think it's genius, but maybe that's because I like it. I don't know. But here's what I say on stuff like that. Hey, Parker, this section, I've already gone through the brokerage fee. I'm now going on to the protection period. Hey, you know what? This form put together by UAR addresses a lot of issues that have developed over the years so that we don't have issues. And this one, by the way, Parker, I know you're not this guy, but I have to explain it to you anyway. Oh, what did I just do? I painted him into a corner. What this says is if my company and if we go through and show you homes for a certain period of time, you're not going to be like some people in the public, again, reinforcing that you're not that person. Some people in the public do, which is they try and do an end run after we've done all the work on their behalf, come back to the seller and say, let's wait till the listing expires, and then we'll just do a deal on the side. I know you're not that type of guy. I would feel badly if somebody did that to me, but that's what this section is about. What are they going to do? Are they going to sit there and argue? No, I am that guy, and I am going to screw you when I get the first opportunity, right? And so, like so many things in our contracts, it depends on how we present them. If you just give like the clinical definition, sometimes people are, one, still going to have blurry eye because they don't know what it means. And two, you haven't put it in its most positive light, right? And I didn't talk about it being my commissions. I mean, I did, but it's way distant. It's all about, hey, you're not that scumbag guy. Okay. All right. I want to make sure I get through these last few items, and I've got 5 minutes. Okay, here we go. What do you do if a seller, knowing a little about the Sitzer Burnett case, asks you about commission? So a little bit of role play here. They say, I don't want to offer out any compensation for a buyer because I read this in the news and I shouldn't have to pay stuff on their behalf. What do you do? What do you say to that quickly, nicely, without getting yourself in more trouble?
That could make it really challenging because some buyers out there barely have enough money for a down payment. So now if they have to cover that cost as well, it could take them out of the game.
Spot on, Bill. Not making it about you. Be like, hey, listen, I have fiduciary of obedience. I'll do what you want, within reason, as long as it's not illegal. But you hired me and my company for a reason, and we know it's a little bit of a tough market right now. And the properties that are moving are the ones that do offer some level of compensation. We can determine what that is, but just to say we're not going to offer any compensation probably means a much lower probability of you selling your house. Right? It's not a hard conversation, guys. That's easy. Easy. All right, second one. Does your company require posting a BAC? Trick question. Careful.
Yes.
Bill, are you sure?
Absolutely.
You are right. You want to know why?
It can be $1. It can, but well, I mean, theoretically.
Finishing up the contract and negotiation class with Mr. Barton.
Theoretically, at another agent
thinking it was early and nobody would be here.
I love when people don't know they're not muted. Anyway, Bill, you're spot on. Let me just connect the dots on that. Currently, the MLS, which we are subscribers to, which means we have a contract with, does have a rule that we must offer a co-broke. It doesn't say how much. It could be a penny, right? So since our company is a subscriber to the MLS, then we're bound by its rules until it changes. So that was a trick question. But if we were to manage expectations, it would be, yes, we do require it, but it is completely negotiable. Yeah, I mean, it can be as little as you want, and then cue up the discussion of making their property attractive, right? and having a higher probability of selling. It should always be redirected about what's best for them. What is best for you? I'm telling you this. I mean, listen, if we can come to terms, great. If not, I've got other people, no offense, that I can work with. I want to work with you. And part of the reason I want to work with you is I want to help you move on in your life, but here's how it has the highest probability, right? For you. It should always be about you. Okay. How much should I offer? Ooh, there's a good one. Okay, so yeah, good explanation, Matt. What's the amount I should put by way of BAC? What's your first line out of your mouth? Jill, what's the first line out of your mouth?
That's up to you, what you would want to do.
Totally negotiable, up to you. Very good. All right, have I beat that horse enough today? It's all negotiable. It's up to you.
How about this one? It depends.
It depends. I like that.
It depends on what percentage of those buyers that barely have enough money for a down payment you want to be able to put offers on your property.
So if I could,
and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just going to share something really briefly, not with all the details, but Dan Dixon has somebody that he's been working with, kind of is negotiating with, hey, I want to do a flat fee or what, blah, blah. And Dan, being a good prodigy, he went and pulled data on this particular marketplace and was able to pull discount brokerages, flat fee brokerages versus more full service brokerages, and roughly broke that down into two categories in a spreadsheet. And he was able to trickle through numbers. Days on market, 40 days more on the flat fees, the lower ones. Price per square foot on average down $10. Just do that math. If you have a 3,000 square foot house, how much is that? $30,000, right? So to your point, Bill, it depends. Let me show you some data that might help you make the decision what's best for getting your home sold, right? And if you have some data like that, it's not hard to find anymore with rapid stats and other things. Woo, you're in the driver's seat. All right, last one. What is the normal amount that I should charge, or what's the industry standard? Doesn't exist. Okay.
There's no such thing.
There's no such thing. Listen, and you know what? Don't make people feel bad about asking the question. Be like, you know what? For some strange reason, Parker, there's this perception that there's an industry standard. And frankly, I think some of my peers unwittingly kind of help create that. But to be completely upfront with you, everything's negotiable. There is no standard. If we did, we would be antitrust and the government would beat us up, right? So it's always negotiable. Let me finish with this. It's a gift that I give to you for being on the call. We talked about how to address this head on. And what I'm about to share with you is not to dodge it, but to get people to focus on something different. So Ashley Wolfewis is our growth manager up in the northern region. She's also a very skilled appraiser and a phenomenal agent. And we were talking in one of our calls a week or so ago, and she said, you know what? I just don't take this head on. I said, wow, what do you do? And she said, well, I make it, here's what I wrote. She says, I think this is what she says to somebody who brings it up, right? Something about the case, something about the change in the landscape, the commission structure. She says, I just think it's sad that poor court decisions put so many of our veterans at a huge disadvantage. And she says, I just let that hang in the air, because what is the person going to say after that? What do you mean it puts them at a disadvantage? And then this is the ability to, they call this a pivot shift, right? Going to something else where you want to direct the conversation. And here are the things that I added to her discussion. It said in 2022 alone, which was a low year, it was about half of normal. There were over 410,000 homes in the United States bought by veterans. 500,000. Let's just round up. 500,000 in a year, in a low year. So in a normal year, it's closer to 1 million veterans trying to get a home. Most people have somewhat of a soft spot for veterans, people who've served in the military, given a little bit of, if you know what people in the military make, it is a sacrifice. anyway, VA loans specifically don't allow
Just
veterans.
a quick, Matt, just a quick thing. I was in the military for 3 years. My take home was $1,200 a month.
Yeah. I've got 2 boys active duty, so I'm very much aware, and it hasn't changed a lot, Parker.
Yeah. I grew up in the military. My dad raised 4 kids on the military. When he retired at the highest rank that he could as an enlisted soldier, he was making $28,000 a year.
Yeah. So anyway, the point being is people typically have somewhat of a sentimental spot for veterans, right? And here's the thing. When you look at the rules for FHA VA, specifically VA, it does not allow a veteran to pay for their own representation. It won't let them pay a brokerage fee. It will, right? And so the net effect of court cases like this is that if it stays, if the appeal doesn't work, and veterans are going to have to come out of pocket for their own agency representation, and given what we just talked about, what they make, it makes it practically impossible for them to have representation when trying to buy a house. That's pathetic, right? And can you see how we just shifted from all of the things about commissions and blah, 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 and industry standards, and all of a sudden it's like, and is it true? Yeah, it's true. That's poor for 500,000 veterans per year. So anyway, there it is, guys. I know some of this was a little bit of a rehash, but I wanted to fill in the blanks to make sure that we are really equipped going forward. And I hope from today's call, you go forward with confidence. If you, like Joyce said, if you establish your value, if you use the forms that are provided for us in the right time frame, and in addition to that, you manage the expectations and explain the protections of the document, you'll kill it. And in fact, this strangely, what's going on both in the correction in the market and cases like this really can and should set you apart as a professional, where people are like, that's why I'm working with Joyce, right? So thanks for being on the call. Have a great week. And by all means, reach out if you have any questions about this or anything else related. I appreciate you guys being on the call. Have a good one.
Thanks.